Hello, Internet friend. Today on Value Side, the great financial deception is ending. What comes next may be painful, but much needed. I'm David Ravel. Well, imagine that I stole $100 and gave it to you. What would economists call this? To answer the question, one must remember that economists are not moralists. They don't care where the money came from, they only record what happens with it. In this case, economists would note that your income increased by $100, which you either spent, increasing consumer spending, or saved. Either way, the economy would have increased by $100. Now note that in my fanciful example, I've excluded the loss recorded by the victims for a reason that will become apparent in a moment. Now, as outrageous as this sounds, this is precisely how our financial system has operated for the past 6 years. Massive amounts of capital have been stolen from our children and grandchildren in the form of debt to be paid by them. Hence, these future victims don't report the crime because many have yet to be born. But upon their shoulders will be placed the debt burden that we've now constructed. Currently, it stands at $323,000 for each man, woman, and child in the country, and it's rising rapidly. Now, none of this comes as a surprise to you, dear listener. You've read about trillions spent on nefarious immigrant programs that brought people into our shores and provided them with transportation and living expenses. You've traced the billions given ostensibly to Ukraine, but ended up with the military contractors here in this country. You remember the trillions in stimulus checks sent to provide support during the COVID-19 crisis. You understand the trillions in quantitative easing, funds that gave the banks the funds to push loans to even the least qualified. The federal government accomplished all this and more by borrowing funds stolen from the future and future generations. This is not something new. We've been dipping into the kitty since at least the Great Depression of the 1930s. Each time there's been an expanse in money printing, like just what we've been through, a recurring pattern emerges, the future comes. And this new diminutive future always begins when the monetary spigots are finally shut off. The last time we had a comparable period was immediately following World War II. That's right. The previous time policymakers pumped the economy as much as they did during COVID was in World War II. And following VE Day, Victory in Europe, and VJ Day, Victory in Japan, there was no longer a need for the battle tanks, warships, and all the arms and munitions that made in the American factories. So the stimulus stopped. And the lost decade of the 1940s began, a period of poor economic growth and deflation. The balloon had burst as Americans' economy transitioned from a fiscal-dominated, Washington-based war machine to a civilian-led free enterprise system. Today, that's the same sort of transition we are beginning currently. The Trump administration is halting many of the stimulus programs started by the prior administrations, both Biden and Trump 1. Trump is sending back the immigrants and eliminating or downsizing many government programs, which you can find delineated on doge.gov website. Programs in education, foreign aid, social reform, and many others. Now, regardless of the merits of these programs and departments, remember, economics focus on dollars and cents, not values. Dropping or eliminating these programs will reduce financial activity and slow the economy. This week, the current report on the nation's GDP, the gross domestic product, showed just how slow the economy is. GDP for 2024 came in at only 2.3%. Down 0.5% from 2023, and less than half the growth levels experienced at the top of the stimulus in 2021, when GDP grew at an astonishing 6.0%. But that's all history now. What's concerning are this week's results from the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model. This real-time tracking model was developed by the Federal Reserve Atlanta analysts, and this report reveals that the economy is in recession now, declining at a 1.5% annually. Now, it's well past time that we begin to return our economy to its historic tradition, a steady state where private industry creates the profits and incomes that drives our prosperity. Our current path of fiscal dominance, where the central government becomes a principal influence on the economy, is a sure route to destruction. The fact that the current administration has begun eliminating these excesses and control of the past 6 years is a welcome sign for those who believe in free enterprise capitalism. However, it may not be an easy or painless path. But let us all resolve to pay the price and bring back this country's foundation of financial freedom and liberty. Now, if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider buying me a cup of coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/David Revill, REAVILL. That's buymeacoffee.com/David Revill. And thanks for listening.